Welcome to another Pharaoh stream with myself, Pharaoh, and we're going to be looking at Interwar art at the Royal Academy 1926. Once again, another whistle-stop tour through the best that the Royal Academy had to offer this year. Time's tight, so I'm going to go straight into it again, but I just want to say sorry for all of the technical problems last time. Maybe one day we'll have a stream where I'm not fully interrupted by something. We'll see. What is the mood? How do I think things are going? Well, I think there's definitely been the kind of this kind of new wave of mood and spirit. You know, comparing back to 1920s, it's obvious that the general zeitgeist is towards newness, but at the same time, I think it's still the old guard are mainly in charge. Although I think we're going to start to see that making a bit of a change today, and I'll talk through why that is. But let's kick off with some art. I'm going to start off with Charles Ricketts here. So Ricketts, as I often say, are kind of Moreau-inspired figure. I mean, one thing I've been reading about Ricketts is actually how long he's been doing art for, and has had kind of several different lifetimes almost. So he's kind of adjacent to Beardsley in the kind of aesthetic movement in the 90s. He's organising the International at the Groves and the Gallery in the noughties, and his Royal Academy period is very different to those earlier sections, but at the same time is a culmination, I think, of all of the ideas that he learnt. And also, interestingly, I think Ricketts is one of the kind of key influencers, both critically and technically, about the importance of the symbolist movement. That kind of very loose connection of figures, mainly French, and you know, if you look at the kind of symbolist group within interwar art in the RA, it's actually, I would say, a decent chunk, maybe 20% of the paintings. So it's interesting to see Ricketts in this mode. This is also Ricketts at his best. I still think some of these paintings are amazing, massively undervalued in terms of how people treat them today, but also their physical price. This piece itself, we've got the Fallen Angels, or Fallen Angel here, I should say. And, you know, we can't talk about Fallen Angels without thinking about Milton, Paradise Lost. There is a very graphic description of the angels falling, and you can see here there are multiple figures here. This is not a reflection on Lucifer, Morning Star, but angels in general. We've got two figures at the front, and you can see they're kind of like, they've kind of been derobed, they've been de-winged, and I think there's kind of an allusion to two figures in the background here, the angels down here with their wings, and this, that, you know, maybe they're starting to kind of lose their elements. The actual figures themselves, I think, are really beautiful. They're yes, they're kind of Renaissance inspired. You know, this is actually not very Moreau. It really, that the figures aren't. It's something more kind of manneristic about it, if I'm honest with you. Like just the way that the feet, the human here has been treated, or the ex-angel. Something maybe Christ-like about him as well, with the arms crossed, and you know, this could be kind of like a figure on a cross, but a little bit outside of the Moreau wheelhouse, although the setting is very Moreau. Again, the classic long portrait, detailed, sumptuous backgrounds here. I've managed to find this exceptionally low resolution half picture of the actual picture itself. We just get an idea of the colors here, and I think it's a shame, obviously, not having the full piece, because I think the quality and finishing is obviously so much better, and all the emphasis is really on this figure on the left, which is being cropped out. But you get an idea of this kind of murky landscape. The the light is shining above, but the angels are in the darkness here. They are deprived of the glory of God here, and that's kind of part of the actual picture is the importance of light there, and I think that's a shame that that's been missed. But I would say this isn't one of my favourite rickets, but a nice treatment to a classic subject at the same time. And often when thinking about the fallen angels, everyone does the kind of like the expulsion of angels from heaven. I did a stream with AA yonks ago about the Art of Revelations that was really good, and most of the angel art was the fall of the rebel angels, them being kind of pushed out and expelled out. Well, this is the kind of the aftermath, and again, I really love Milton when he describes them kind of getting together and starting to gang up. So we're just getting this like little vignette before that moment. Okay, nice. What's the next piece here? Well, we've got another one from Wiley here. Tends to do a lot of watercolors and etchings. This is Jutland, the attack of the 13th Flotilla. I did a bit of research to try and actually find out about this war, so this fight, I should say. This was a battle between the British Grand Fleet and the German High Seas Fleet off the coast of Denmark in May 1916. A total of 279 ships were engaged. I basically think it was like a large fight, and then there was like two of the German battle cruisers were knocked out. So I mean, almost 300 ships involved in the engagement is quite substantial, and you can get this real idea of the kind of the fog of war. There's something almost kind of like Elizabethan kind of Armada-esque about this, just with it, or Nelson-esque, with it, just the sheer number of ships and the kind of smoke and the fire, and also look at all of the kind of the bombardments flying up. This is all about verticals and horizontals, and again, I think I mean, just thinking about maritime paintings. And during the kind of Regency and Georgian period, like obviously the Navy was super important then. And in fact, like the Navy was considered higher than the Army at that point, although by this point the Army had kind of greater standing, really. But a lot of those paintings are about men engaged in boarding action. We forget about just how much hand-to-hand fighting there is, and because of that, you need to have things zoomed in. It's about the individual. While for this era, it's really about the mechanical. It's about the ships themselves. It's about the fight as a whole, and you never see the individual. I think that's an interesting change in the genre. But again, I think Wally does a really good job here for a nice little maritime piece. Okay, we've got another Avril Burley. If you remember, she did that kind of self-portrait in tempera last time. I would put her in the Griffenhagen school, like symbolist adjacent, quite graphic. This piece is kind of like, it's called the Sand Dunes. It's obviously three women playing with a child. It's also an excuse for to kind of show a nude. The actual scene itself is quite fun. I love this child. Being a father, you see moments like this all the time, and there's nothing better than a happy baby. I think this does verge. This is on the very edge of sentimentality for me, but I'm kind of interested in the background that Burley's put us in here. There's something very desolate about the sand dunes. Maybe there's it's not necessarily like a beach that's kind of normal. Like the sand dunes of Cornwall or something like that. It's a more desolate landscape here. So I wonder whether there is a more symbolic meaning that we might be missing out on here. But yeah, lovely piece there from Avril. We've got another speed piece here, and this one's called The Annunciation. Now, again, I think my criticisms with Speed have always been that he verges too close to realism here. And again, I think this piece does suffer from that a little bit. We've got the Annunciations, that is, again, Mary being informed that she is going to hold the Christ child. We've got a novel setting. If you remember, we had Philpot's Annunciation with the kind of angel crawling on the floor, but it was still in a kind of like a village setting. This one, Speed's put her in the middle of like by a lake here, and I think actually for Speed's backgrounds are actually most excellent, and I do really appreciate them, really love them. I think it's the figures for me, I feel like, are too rendered, and it sort of takes us out of the illusion here. The Mary is as well as really nice. We've got a contrapposto. She's turning around. It's she's a figure of humility, of grace, of humbleness here. But I think for me, the angel just doesn't work. Where you've got these kind of like small wings coming out. There's some nice detailing around the cloth and the fabric. Speed showing off his skills, but I think ironically, I don't mind the setting. I don't think that it's particularly great. There's almost these kind of like weird paving stones here. Maybe this is like a promenade looking out onto the river or something like that. But I feel like the setting doesn't feel right. But I think it's still, an interesting piece. Speed for me is almost. He's so close with a lot of paintings, but it just doesn't click for me. But still, I would say above average for what was out there. Okay, we've now got this is almost like our yearly Orpen painting. I mean, he's really in his flow right now. Orpen, one thing I would say about him is that he was, quite the, I think extortionist is the wrong word, but definitely he knew his value and was happy to charge people. It's kind of, it reminds me of Whistler or something like that in that regard. He knew he was good and made people pay for that. And also, being a portraitist was going to make a lot of money. This is interesting because I think this is kind of showing. I've talked about interwar portraiture as a big departure historically. It's been way more casual, certainly in terms of the poses and the kind of the moods and gestures. But also, we've got a surgeon here. The terrible. The terrible middle class coming through. Okay. I don't know where. I couldn't find much information about. Oh, wait a second. Maybe I've got a few little bits here. Number 6. No, sorry. I do have a few little bits. He was elected surgeon into St George's in 1819, and then became a consultant by 38. His name is Ivor Back. I'm just trying to see what school he went to. See, he doesn't say his school, so this is why I feel like he's kind of like middle class, although he did go to Trinity and Trinity Hall, Cambridge. So still definitely part of the the kind of top level establishment. But I still feel like there's a bit of an opening up to portraiture and the classes involved, and a slackening off of these societal ties. Basically, the painting itself, I think, is quite wonderful. The surgeon's gloves immediately shows his profession. Yes, there's that kind of casualness of pose, but kind of legs wide apart, strong arms either side gives him, strength and masculinity. But at the same time, I think Orphan's rendered his hands very delicately here. And again, I think it's the emphasis on the hands of the surgeon, of course, as in the hands of an artist in some ways. And the face, I would say, is a little bit more. There's a bit more detail to this. We've seen Orphan do his kind of more Sargent-esque impressionist style pieces previously, while this feels a little bit more rendered than previous work. But and I like the colors. Again, I think when you're dealing with like a full white outfit, like with him in his surgeon's gown, I think it's difficult. But I think the whole piece looks really lovely. Okay, we've got another Cayley Robinson. If you remember, he did the Shepherds by the Lake last time, again in the kind of Griffinhagen school. This is kind of like, if you remember, the Shepherds piece was kind of pseudo symbolist, pseudo-realist at the same time. It was definitely a shepherds. They were lambing, weren't they? But then it was placed in this kind of interesting scenario. And again, I think Kaylee Robinson's looking at these kind of realist scenes, but through the symbolist lens, I think. So there's a couple of interesting things. Yes, it's a family, and we've got the kids playing checkers across here, some embroidery going on by one of the older daughters, and I think the mother here at the background with some tea. Mother or maid, it's hard to tell. I'm going to say probably the maid by her outfit. But there's some really interesting compositional elements to this. Lots of detail. But it's all about verticals, I think, for this. So you've got the kind of the verticals of the embroidery, the two figures across here. Her hand has been placed up. The maid in the background. You've got the kind of the tall chair and the harp. So all of these kind of lines. There's balance on either side. But there's a few of these interesting symbolist elements, like the swifts in the background darting past the window, or the doll's house looking up across here. So it's really interesting and novel. Again, I'm more of a pure symbolist, but I think he's trying to do something a little bit different than some of the other guys are doing here. And I think it's a lovely composition, really well painted and rendered, very interesting. Okay, we've got another Dixie here, and I wanted to show you this because I've actually managed to find the color photo for this. I went through one of my my Frank Dixie catalog raison, sorry, and this is Miss Phyllis Kay. This is just a classic Dixie portrait, but we haven't seen many of them in color at all. I mean, I would say that he definitely has moved away from the kind of pure ethereal, kind of like almost quasi-mystical, to a more realist slant, which is fine, but I prefer Dixie in his kind of more mystical vein. I think the other reason why I did it was there are some slight painting changes here, but you can see the colors, and again, I think it looks a little bit softer in color, certainly with the work on the arms. I mean, the dress, this is about textures and colors, but it's also about delicateness, and I think Dixie just captures women in their delicate and soft mode really nicely. So let's just talk about the textiles here. We've got her in some kind of beautiful silk dress, some embroidery at the bottom, but also she's been wearing this coat, which has got this lovely kind of jacquard and blue, but then pink satin lining, maybe a little bit of fur across there. And there's also this kind of oriental screen going on, and the fabric of the chair. So this is 4 different difficult fabrics to paint. I mean, the satin looks great, but he's managed to harmonize everything together, so nothing stands out too much. But I think it's the genius is, of course, the pink of the satin just acts as a really nice counterbalance to the dress itself, but also the kind of the rosy cheeks, etc. And then there's definitely these kind of green undertones to the skin. It's like a yellow green. In terms of the sitter, he's got her sitting down as like classic Dixie, but her arms are kind of outstretched here. There's that delicateness. She's holding her pearls in her left hand. There's a bit of mystery. Maybe she's kind of looking out, thinking of something. There's a definite kind of, she's not engaging with the viewer, which I think's a little bit different, but a really wonderful piece here from Dixie. Okay, we've got another Lavery piece. Again, this one looked a little bit better in black and white. I feel like this looks a little bit more sloppy, and again, it's difficult when you've got the young upstart that is Lavery next to a true master by this point, Dixie. So this is Miss Julia Maguire. Again, I would say nice. I think the colours are a little bit off from the picture, but I still included it just because the color photo is still better. But it's greens, yellows, pinks. Nice little bit of handwork across there. Again, I think this is more of like a masculine pose, if I'm honest with you, the crossed fingers. But there's a contemplation to that. I like the kind of aggressive looking at the kind of view of there's a 3/4 turn in the body, but still kind of doing that quite confrontational pose. So that combined with the hands kind of gives us that strength and some kind of nice light coming from the right hand side here, giving us some lovely bit of shadow for him to play with. Personally, I like a bit more rendering, as you know, on the fabrics, etc. But still, good piece from Lavery here. Right, G. Spencer Watson. We haven't had something from him for a little while. Watto's portraits are good. I would say they're good, never great, but I do really like his kind of mythical and realist works at the same time. And this is him with his family, the us riding. The family riding is really interesting because I've seen a lot of his various bits that he has, and he likes to come back to this motif. I think there's 3 or 4 paintings of him and his family riding, lots of sketches, lots of little bits around it, and clearly a family man. The piece itself is really. I'm generally not too much of a fan of horse painting outside of the King of Horses, Stubbs. Why is Stubbs better? That's a good question. I think that Stubbs manages to elevate elevate the format of horse painting beyond almost like a biological science to an investigation of the animal that is horse in its kind of more primal spiritual significance. That is, I think there's a lot of horse paintings which are about, like, look at my horse, or isn't this a well-bred horse, isn't this a good-looking horse, as opposed to the horse as symbol. This piece itself is almost like realism, but for the upper classes. This is what a lot of people still did. Going for a hack. The actual composition is really lovely here. We've got a picture outside a hall. I don't know if it is their house or a house, but it's all about triangles here. So you can see the gables of the kind of mansion in the background, the triangles at the front here, this lovely wrought iron gatehouse. But then we've got the 3 figures across there. This is all about threes and trios, although kind of balanced with a dog here for a little bit of variation. And again, the 2 putti either side, balancing everything out. Really, just a really nice piece of rendering. I particularly like the pony across here. I think this little pony's got so much character, and really nicely done here from Watson. Okay, this is something a little bit different, a landscape, but more of a pen and ink. I've tried to stay away from etchings unless they will really stand out. And this is by F.L. Griggs. This is the first time we've seen anything for him. I think maybe we have had him already. And you can see basically there is a kind of a rocky road up to a castle wall, and behind that a city with a cathedral. And at the bottom, I don't know if you can see this, there's a single line of text, and that line is taken for the title here. The bells call clearly from ancient spire and moulded walls to lands where moves the lustrous grail, and where Saras is beautiful in the still air. Now, I tried to find out the location of this. What's the story from? But certainly the translation version that they're using here didn't match up to any online texts. But I'm 90% sure that it is one of the Percival Grail stories. There's definite mention to the Grail, so that there's only 3 people involved with Grail stories: Lancelot, Gawain, and Percival. So that kind of rounds it down. And then I think the Saras is another clue, and this could be the Dolorous city, which I think that's right, the Dolorous. which has the Fisher King inside, and so but it kind of appears out of mist. I think I need Nathan Hood here to kind of school me on the Grail stories. But this is basically a almost like a mythic fantasy piece done as landscape. So just taking that one line, Griggs has managed to kind of create this entire landscape from imagination. I mean, let's talk about this little the road up to the castle. This is there's a cragginess, a roughness. This is kind of like Sidney Lee in his rocky phase. There's a little shepherd across here, a little bridge, a little water spout thing across here, a bird sitting on top of it. Just loads of little details and intricacies that make it really, really beautiful. But then I think one of my favorite parts is this wall. And again, I think the artist could have gone with something very simple, very dull. But look at the detail, look at the interest in there. There's so much, like there's a gatehouse section, but every little piece of wall has a bit of novelty, a little turret or a tower that's a little bit different. And that adds to the kind of interest. And then obviously the kind of the tall spires and moldings that are referenced in the background, which are almost fading away in the shadows. And again, I think that gives it the ethereal quality of the Grail City. Really nice piece here from Griggs. Okay, now we've got a controversial piece here from Sauter, I think it is. Yeah, Sauter. We have had some of Sauter's previous work. He did a couple of portraits a few years ago, but this is basically his greatest work, and also the notorious work, The Breakdown. Now, I don't want to get banned from my channel giving my opinions on it, but I'm just going to read out a little bit of blurb that I took from one of the Royal Academy's own websites, and I'll give my thoughts on it as a piece of art. The Breakdown is a strikingly accomplishing painting. Yes, it was a subject that caused controversy, as the painting depicts a black saxophonist sitting on a shattered classical statue of Minerva, the goddess of music, while a naked woman dances to his music. The woman appears to move as though in a trance, totally abandoning herself to the music, and her discarded clothing and shoes are as visible in the far corner of the composition. Within days of its exhibition, the British Colonial Office contacted the Royal Academy to request the removal of this picture for reasons of state, not art, and in the interests of empire. Sauter claimed that his painting was intended to illustrate the tendency nowadays for jazz influence to permeate our daily lives. And this is true. Jazz was beginning to filter through to wider cultural life, and in many circles, the radical change this represented towards freedom and a breakdown of strict social norms was met with celebration and enthusiasm. Yet at the same time, the British Empire and the wider racism it represented, no comment on that from the RA there, were obviously felt to be under threat, and the incident was featured in news stories as far as USA, India, and South Africa, and records made of society figures making comments such as, it would make ruling our natives difficult. Now, it's interesting that the RA is kind of looking at this piece as kind of like, well, I mean, there's a few interesting bits just to critique this little bit of art history here. Jazz was beginning to filter into the wider cultural life, and this radical change represented freedom. And I thought that was so interesting, because is jazz freedom? Was that what it was selling? And a breakdown of strict social norms. I think there's certainly a truth to that, but I think there is a darker. I think there's a darker side to the analysis, in the fact, just purely as a vessel of Americanism. That's what to me what it really represents is this jazz music is the first kind of truly alien cultural concept that captured the minds and hearts of the elite of Britain in a long time. And now I want to talk about why it was removed. Like, RA is trying to frame it as that this piece is kind of showing too many truths, and it's making people ruling hard. Again, I think that's totally the wrong idea. I think firstly, the painting itself received a huge amount of criticism from the press. And again, this is the American influence, the media influence. In my landscape painting, in my landscape analysis, I mentioned about the kind of the three kind of forces within Empire at this point, with the like die-hard, like old school Empire bods like Curzon, etc. But you've also got the kind of civil service and the media class trying to push for essentially an American style ruling. And I think that what this represents is that the painting represents a critique of the attack that was happening, the cultural attack that was happening in Britain after the war, and essentially the dissolving of. I think the comment about dissolving societal norms is true, but the RA is looking at it in a positive way and talking about freedom to do what freedom is this. What this represents for me is Sauter looking to see the beginning of the end for him, and everything he loved being replaced by Americanisms. And again, I mean, you feel free to like whatever music you like, but I think you need to understand culture as a reflection of the living organism that is nation at the same time. And so I think Sauter was seeing this almost as if I don't know, some kind of cancer or something like that on society and what it represented, which is the breakdown of empire. And I think he basically called it in this is 1926. This is really like Mussolini's around, but we're still allied to him at this time, and this is kind of before Hitler. So he knows what's happening. He can see the creeping Americanisms. He can see the importance that culture has had. And I think this is one of the most powerful critiques from the right that artistically, and that unsurprisingly it's been buried, or kind of art historians have kind of reframed this as, this is a problematic to prevent rulership. The Colonial Office at this point is just that they are so unbelievably woke. I see it as they're worried that they're trying to push to a Commonwealth style model. It's not about trying to control people easier. It's about offending people. This is an offensive artwork to those colonial people. So this is the first cancellation. I would say, interestingly, that Sauter did actually so basically he got oh, sorry about the screen. Okay. He got he had so much pressure on this, especially from his wife. He actually burned the original painting and then repainted it in the 60s toward the end of his life, and the version that's knocking around is the repainted version. So I think, just in terms, let's move away from the politics of it, which is very, very powerful, and into the actual composition itself here. So we've got, it's pretty much as described, two figures, the black saxophonist sitting on the statue, the kind of almost ritual dance that she's in. I think that was one thing that's not mentioned is Sauter's trying to connect the past to the present, and this isn't a jazz dance that she's doing. This almost looks like it's some kind of like like Roman, like Bacchae kind of style dance. I also think there's something interesting about the saxophonist sort of looking to the left, like who's he looking to, and I think that that's the other implication of the painting, that there is a third unseen person in this scene that's um, that's also involved at the same time. And he's saying, who is that person? There's an interesting piece about contrasting this kind of like black abyss of the background and the woman. There's also a few other interesting elements, which is, he's not even sitting in the ruins. He is sitting on top of the head, and look at his foot. It's crushing the hand of Minerva. So and the rendering's brilliant on it. I think it's actually a brilliant compositional piece, brilliant symbolic piece, and highly underrated, although controversial. So interesting one from Sorter there, but definitely one of my favourites from this year. Okay, let's go to the next piece, which is the Target by Fortescue Brickdale here. Now, Brickdale, we've had these kind of, I thought, quite cheesy, like pseudo-historical Gothic pieces, but this one's, in my mind, is much better because it goes into the world of allegory, but still pulls from her kind of like historicism and like Leighton-esque genre. And this is called The Target. There's a woman on the right hand side laughing with some flowers in her hands, and we've got these kind of four figures shooting at the woman. And so we ask ourselves, well, what's going on? Why are they shooting at the woman? Well, we see why they're shooting, and who's this little chap down here, little pooty with wings. Of course, it's Cupid, and he's trying to get people involved in this kind of target shoot. And the four figures, despite being unbelievably close to the woman, are all totally missing. And Cupid is trying to involve this last chap across here. So obviously, this is Cupid's blow. It's all about a target of love, and these suitors are all enraptured by her. I think there's something interesting here where she's kind of almost like standing on her toes, looking at this guy across here. So I think maybe that's the true target. But it's a fun allegorical piece, rendered really nicely. I mean, I just love the expression on this suitor across here. Very entertaining. And the piece has been put into a classic like Renaissance background, the checkered floor, the revetments in the background, and then like a dark forest as well. So I think this is Brickdale really at her finest. This is one of my favorite paintings of hers. It's showing kind of, yes, it's showing her technique and her mastery and ability. There's none of that kind of like cheesiness of a historical, like a sad historical subject. It's just a fun, symbolic, allegorical style with very amusing little vignettes in there. So yeah, I really like this one. Okay, we've had 4 years now, I think, of Anning Bell's mosaics. I don't want to spend too much longer on this, but we've got the final one, basically. This is King Edward III Commands the Rebuilding of St. Stephen's Chapel. And I've got the final picture across here. I think this is in... this is towards the end of the room, basically, and you can see, again, the mosaic at the top. In my mind, it's not my favourite. That the best ones are definitely the Irish and the Scottish ones, in my opinion. They had some really brilliant figures, but again, I think it just completes the room, makes a brilliant space. Very good, but obviously it's part of a set. So, but it just shows that it's like an epic. So something like mosaic work is not like oil painting where you can bash something out in 6 months. This is a much bigger piece, a much bigger investment, time, and very magnificent as well. So, I mean, anything to take from here at all? I mean, the face of on the across here in the center, I think is really really interesting. Very, very noble, very powerful, and I always love when you have these kind of medieval-esque miniature versions of the pieces themselves coming up across there. Right, let's take a look at the next piece, and this is from Ernest Proctor. I think we've had Proctor before. He is the husband of Todd Proctor, so it's the other power couple. I would say his work is more in the sculptural modernism, the kind of deco style pieces. His most famous piece is the Zodiac. The Zodiac piece down at Tate Britain. But again, I think he's really underrated. I actually much prefer his work over his wife. His wife tends to do more kind of nudes and more realism, while I feel like this is definitely more in the allegorical vein. And this one's called the Mischievous Boy. And obviously, this isn't the tale of a boy being naughty, but it's obviously Cupid again. And this time he's discarded his bow across there. I mean, he's got his hand over the woman's face and is rather rudely fondling her at the same time. So you've got this kind of juxtaposition of this kind of cheeky chappy, but is also, being quite lewd. The female figure, I think, is really beautifully rendered here, and again, I think that's what makes this piece really stand out. Like, look at the leg work, etc., the torso, the lighting for it's all brilliant. Again, our kind of quote unquote deco style artists tend to be a little bit more realist than the French or American schools, but again, you can still see that kind of the smoothness and the contours definitely marking it out. You've also got this interesting symbolic background. You've got the two turtle doves there, the two lovers. You've got the heart symbol, and then the female symbol. You can see the Ernest Proctor in the corners as well. So there's something almost Crivelli-esque about it. I think this is done in tempera as well, so you have that kind of vividness of color. And look at the Cupid's arrows are lovely here. That kind of deep red, and that's kind of pulled out through the red of the hair and the bow and the flowers. And again, lots of attention to the detail of the background as well, creating a really nice, really interesting piece. Okay, we've got something from Hawksley now. Again, I think this is another one. I think we've had Hawksley already, but maybe not. But she does these kind of like almost illustrative style watercolors. And here we've got Daphne. This is coming straight out of the story of from Ovid's Metamorphosis. Apollo. I think Apollo had offended Cupid or something like that, or maybe Venus, and to get her revenge, Cupid fired a love arrow at Apollo, and Cupid also had the ability to fire a lead-tipped arrow, which makes people hate you. And Apollo basically tried to assault Daphne, but I think Venus took pity on her and transformed her into the laurel tree. And that's why Apollo's wreath is the laurel wreath. And I think the idea is you've got the figure of Apollo, or the kind of hunt going on behind, and then she is kind of falling into the, she's going into the tree, but she's also going to turn into the tree. I haven't got a great photo here, and I would say that Hawksley's power is in her color as well, unfortunately. So it's a shame that we can't see some of that bit. But I think just compositionally, it's really interesting, and again, a little bit different, a little bit fresh. Definitely some influence from like the French watercolor illustrators like Louis Acart, and again, if you see any Vogues in the 20s, they adopt this kind of style. I think Dupart does a few bits like this as well. So I would describe this as, you know, very, very kind of French school, although they themselves are heavily influenced by Beardsley and the British. So this is kind of like illustration gone full circle. I mean, I've been meaning about the illustration here. I think it's difficult. I think watercolor mythic paintings tend to just get lumped in as pure illustrations, but I think Daphne was clearly doing this as a standalone piece. It's a good size piece as well. So this is a painting in its own right. Okay, we've got a piece here called Peg's Toilet from Floraline. There is a bit of a meme for toilet-based paintings as an excuse to kind of show a nude, basically. But we've got this nice nude, but I included it again. It's a new female artist, Floraline. She starts to get included a few times here. You've got this kind of woman looking into her vanity, something maybe like a little bit I don't know, French realist mid-century about this as well. But there's kind of reflections on vanity as well. The nude is decent. Maybe I mean, looking at it now, there's a little bit something wrong with the kind of the back of the chest across here, but I think just a well-rendered piece, and there's going to be quite a few of these nude pieces going forward as well, so thought I'd include it. Now, we haven't had much sculpture so far. We've got this piece from Bertram McKennell here, which is another war memorial but in Blackburn this time. Now, I don't have no idea why the RA photographer went for this this view, because maybe it's kind of showing off the both figures at once, but this is like the worst view possible. Maybe Bertram submitted this in the studio or something. Luckily, I've managed to track down the real piece, and it's a much better view. I mean, definitely reminiscent of the Pegram piece from the previous year, which I think does do a better job, but McKennell's is very nice here. I mean, I'd say this is one of the most low-key war memorials to date. This terrible decking. Look at this awful decking. I don't know what's happened here. Maybe the rock got to it or something, but the actual staging, I think, is like 0 out of 10. Although I do sort of like the statue emerging from this big overgrown hedge at the same time, which no doubt has just been left by the council. Here we go. Here's our close-up picture. Similar to Pegram, we've got the kind of the figure of peace or the knight in the background. I mean, I sort of, you know, McKennell likes to have these slimmer models. Pegram has those kind of bigger, chunkier rectangle women. There's definitely more. She's more lithe, more shapely, but still in these kind of beautiful robes. And then you've got the figure of the man. I mean, look how delicately she's holding him. She's just supporting him, and he's sort of looking at peace. You know, this could be a moment of dying, and it could be a moment of reliving at the same time. So I think there's that interesting juxtaposition there. But another, like, McKennell has had a very strong RA career so far. Lots of good bits from him. So nice little piece here. Okay, we've got another Cadogan Cooper piece. I mean, this is the third piece, which third portrait, which is very similar, but there's a slight variation. He does these kind of young ethereal girls looking head on at the at the sitter, and but this time, rather than having her sit in a big circle of furs, she's just standing up. Again, I think this is a little bit samey right now, but it definitely does stand out from the rest of the portraits that are happening. So he has got a niche, which is kind of like, you know, sprightly young girls, but he does do it well at the same time. I still think that first painting of his from the trio was his best work. Okay, this is something a little bit different, something from Howard. Have I got something about this? No, is the answer. Sorry, I haven't included enough stuff about new artists here, but this is another. I'm going to put this in the kind of symbolist vein, but also, I mean, thinking about influences again, I keep talking about the old masters as being one kind of drawing point, but I'm also thinking 15th century Renaissance comes back time and time again. When we look at a San Sebastian like this, we instantly think Mantegna, Bellini, but this is quite different. Okay, the Mantegna Sebastian has him against a column, I'm pretty sure, but you don't see who his assaulters are. And in this case, we do get like a little trio. Yes, he's attached to a column, but he's sort of leaning against it rather than kind of bound up in the same kind of way. There is a more of a swagger, I would say, to this Sebastian. But I do really like the kind of figures looking on and shooting. Again, it has this kind of weird, like feeling which is halfway between the old and the new. This could, yes, it definitely has a kind of a Renaissance feeling, but again, the way that he's rendering the figures gives it that kind of more contemporary feeling at the same time. I do really like the actual Sebastian figure himself. I'm sorry for the low quality image. This like brilliant rendering, muscular. In terms of kind of showing muscle groupings, etc. But I like his expression as well, which is one of peace and looking out. Often Sebastian, we only see him kind of post being stabbed by arrows, basically. So nice variants on that. Okay, we've got a couple of Morleys in this one, and this is the first one. This is Christ washing the disciples' feet. Again, this is a classic Renaissance subject. You've kind of got the disciples coming up from their dinner across. They're coming to dinner, and he starts to wash their feet individually. We've got kind of Christ looking up, but is he looking up at the figures or is he looking up at God? Who is he truly serving? Again, I think, like I said, his mythic pieces are better than his theological, which are better than his realist pieces. But I still think, a nice overall piece. I think you need to see his colours as well, because Morley paints a lot in tempera, so that makes it a bit novel and a bit more vibrant. But nice piece here. Nothing, I would say, like the actual kind of this kind of disciple here is pretty brilliant actually, but the Christ I'm less keen on. Okay, we've got, speaking of Pegram, we've got Pegram doing a sculpture panel for the Preston War Memorial here. Here we've got this kind of Victory-esque figure holding two wreaths. I mean, look, this is Pegram putting a waistline on a woman. That's quite shocking, really. I've managed to dig out the actual piece itself. The real one does look a bit better, although I still feel like Pegram is definitely one of the weaker sculptors from the kind of new sculpture group. You've got these kind of souls either side of her. She's sitting on a globe as well, which is quite cool. But I think just a nice piece. McKennell, I think, just blows him out of the water this year, though, sadly. Although he had that day in the sun last time. Now, the best sculpture from this year by far is Reed Dick's Spinner, which is, I think it is an attempt to move beyond kind of the Mestrovich vein into, again, something mythical and mysterious. And this is done in bronze. You've got his kind of, he definitely has like a style when he's depicting robes. It's this kind of very angled stripes across there, but we've got a definite, like a much stronger bit of realism on the face here, and then in her hands she's got some kind of thread, and that's taken from the spinning wheel, I guess, and that's why she's the spinner. But I think there is something beyond the kind of like naturalism here. You know, if he wanted to depict a woman with a spinning wheel, he would have her like showing the actual wheel itself. What he has got her doing is sort of holding a thread in her hands, and so I think there is something almost of the fates about her at the same time. There's also, look at the face, there's some great contemplation in the face, such nobility and beauty, but also like a sad mourningfulness as well. Is she reading the threads of mankind, or a man, or a hero, or something? You know, we don't know. And the pose itself, I think, is something, you know, this could be like a Buddhist inspired or something transcendental as part of it. Now, in terms of the color photo, I've managed to find a plaster cast by him. I have to say, far inferior to the original. Like, look, compare the faces. So much nobility there compared to the secondary face. I don't know if this was an earlier version that got cast, etc. But a third version was actually used as part of basically one of my favourite buildings in London, which is the old Grosvenor Gallery buildings, which got rebuilt. I think it got rebuilt in the 20s, but I think it had already been rebuilt, and then they've added to the statue to this. Now you can see, if you just compare the faces here, face there to there to here, it's hard to tell, but I feel like this third version is closer to the original. This is also carved stone and then put up there, as opposed to I'm pretty sure this is like in bronze, basically. But I think he's done an amazing job. I think she looks brilliant, much like the first one. Obviously, having to kind of mess around with the spinner part and make it not as detailed, just for practical reasons with the stone, but some, you know, truly beautiful stone casting. I love this statue and I love the building. However, if anyone has seen this is actually where the kind of Burberry office is. So if you look down below is the Burberry building. This sits under the main kind of rotunda tower. It's a Belcher building, by the way. This is genuinely one of like the best modernist buildings in London that people don't even notice and look by. I mean, as soon as you see the roof, you think Stocklet Tower. You don't know. I think that's so Stocklet. And we've got some lovely figures. I think the jury did the figures either side, and again, they are totally brilliant. And they've added the spinner on. This isn't even like the ground floor. It's still way high up. I don't think I've got another picture, but the statue is brilliant, but it is the wrong size for the space. So again, if you compare it in scale to the figures at the top, I think even these figures, to be honest with you, are lost. If you look and see what Metzner did for the Stocklet Palace, the figures are much simpler and they're much bigger. So again, you get an idea of an impression of the form of them from afar. So you can see what's happening very simply. Like, you cannot see what's happening with these figures from the ground. You literally need a telescope. And it's the same with a spinner, totally lost even from, if you go across the street from this. I've often actually just sat, there's a nice little bench. If you want a nice couple of hours, sit opposite this building and do some sketches from it. You will see that this figure is way too small. So brilliant sculpture, great, like definitely one of the best bits, one of my winners from this year. But poorly placed and lost. You know, this is why the sculptor needs to work in collaboration with an architect for success. You know, this is why Wheeler and Baker, for example, do such great work together, because they are there's not a secondary thought. They're not just attaching sculpture to a statue. It becomes part of the process. Okay, I've been a bit down on Pegram. One thing that's interesting about Pegram is that he does some kind of weird ornamental stuff that's never mentioned. And we saw previously there was some stuff about a candelabrum. we have another piece here, a model for a group on the upper part of a suggested candelabrum. I mean, this is unlike any other candelabrum that one would have seen. We've got kind of Jesus, or maybe it's God the Father that's represented here, and the figures around are sort of around this kind of this strange kind of almost rainbow-like circle with a couple of angels flanked. So again, you look at this and think, how on earth is this part of a candelabrum? Now, I have not managed to find this candelabrum. However, I'm pretty sure I've found something similar to it. And interestingly, Pegram did a series of candelabums for St. Paul's. So this is the kind of finished design that I think he was going for. I think the whole thing is totally insane, and I absolutely love it. It's kind of like classical Gothic, is the only way I could describe it. There is total abundance of figures and ornament and detail here. So you can see there's some kind of like a couple of figures at the bottom, and then there's like 5 or 6 different levels to it. And then these kind of, look at the beautiful sweeps here at the top for the candelabrum. But it's all in kind of classical motifs. Again, Pegram is in the Thornycroft Renaissance side of the new sculpture group. So he's doing everything in this classical mode, but this is obviously still a Gothic piece because it's about complexity and abundance at the same time. Okay, a little bit more deco for you guys. We've got our first kind of like, well, this is the most deco-esque, quote, deco-esque sculpture so far, I would say, from Frank Mowbray Taubman. Let's see if I've got... no, I've not got notes on this either. I'm sorry, guys. It's obviously Diana hunting with the greyhounds. Diana is like a deco obsession, basically. Again, this, in my mind, definitely re-emphasizes the fact that the quote unquote deco movement is a reactionary one that is trying to flank the extreme modernists of the French avant-garde from a kind of a classical viewpoint, if that makes sense. And from an academic viewpoint, they're still taking classical subjects and classical motifs as opposed to totally trying to destroy all tradition in the same way that the futurists would do, for example. Do I like the piece? I think it's interesting. I would say it's not one of my favorites, but I included it because of that kind of zeitgeisty deco feel. The Americans do this kind of stuff way better than we do at this point. I think we've had the more. Maybe we haven't had this one already. This is just another Morley naturalist piece. It's called The Peddler. You've got this guy showing all of his different wares. This is again just straight up in the naturalist camp. So I won't talk too much on that. But we've got something a little bit interesting here from William Macmillan. And again, I don't think we've had much from him so far, but he is going to be a really important artist in the next couple of years. This is just a small little decoration, or like a little maquette that I think he's had made up for this. But Macmillan is an important, I would say, one of the important monumental sculptors of this kind of period. Now, him and Wheeler are explicitly engaged in what they call medieval modernism. So that is trying to create something new, but again looking to the past at the same time. I would put Bourdelle definitely within that kind of way of thinking. I mean, we can't see too much here, but again, it's obviously kind of classically inspired here, the two fawns, but stylistically modern. There's abstractions going on, there's kind of smoothness, etc. Pretty average piece, but just keep an eye on Macmillan here, so that's why I included it. Now, I think for me, the real big winner is Bayes again. I mean, the sculpture that we're seeing right now, I'm more sculpturally inclined, so Please decide on your own. But I feel like the sculpture is very strong at this point here. Now, Bayes, we've had a few pieces from him so far. He is often described as Britain's Deco sculptor. Again, I just don't see it like that. He's obviously more stylized than a lot of the new sculpture guys, and I think he is definitely influenced by French Deco sculpture, but it's always rooted in the kind of new sculpture, classical Renaissance, and also Gothic style. Now, this has one of the best titles of the entire show. It's called "England, My Mother, Wardress of Waters, Builder of Cities, Maker of Men." I mean, that's powerful. And you've got this amazing, powerful figure, a woman who's, you've got one strong leg across here, but on her back leg, she's kind of lifting up, giving force to the left. Out of her hand, she's holding a Triton. She's got a helmet on her head, and she's standing on with something. Again, this is some terrible lighting here from whoever's doing the photograph. However, this sculpture was taken to be used by the Adventurers Society or something like that, an award for that, and is still used today. And you can get an idea of what the piece looks like in its kind of polychrome style. But I mean, a few things to say. The woman herself is just like a new sculpture masterpiece. I mean, you do not get depictions of the woman's body as beautiful or as elegant, but also as motivated and forceful as that. But he's got some of these kind of more sculptural, stylistic elements, specifically the helmet. I mean, that's just so brilliant. And again, it's a shame that the Triton is obviously broken off in the main in the meantime, because I think that does add more emphasis. Look at the other hand at the back here, holding the clothes. Really cool. The rest of the trophy is also brilliant here as well. This kind of like obviously Egyptian, Assyrian inspired. You know, again, I feel like British Deco is the most like Babylonian, Assyrian, Egyptian influenced school in the world. Interestingly, you know, it's less classical than the French, for example. And there's this lovely kind of Nereid, whatever they're called, seahorse across there, horsefish. Slightly reminiscent of, I think it's called like the Lady of Time, the statue on the, what's it called, on the Selfridges building. But I think this is brilliant. This is my favorite Gilbert Bayes statue that's there. Very, very powerful. Again, this is it's academic but also modern at the same time. Really, really beautiful. Okay, that is it for this year. A little bit longer than I was hoping for. But I think some really interesting little pieces we've come across. What's my favourite? I think. So let me just bring up some of the pictures here a second. I think, yeah, the Gilbert Bayes, England, the spinner is really great. Obviously, Salter's breakdown is brilliant. Yeah, I'd say those ones were my favourites from this year. So again, Sculptra definitely taking the strongest position at this time. However, one thing I forgot to say was this was the year that Frank Dixie became head of the Royal Academy. So again, there's a changing of the guards that happens. There's this new interest, and I think Dixie starts to zhuzh things up again. He obviously was a younger guy than the previous guys that were there, and he's going to push for younger, more avant-garde artists. So keep watching this space. Let's see how things evolve, and I'll catch you on the next stream.